This here is one alveolus. One alveolus. And it's one of these. Can you see? That's one of them. That's one of them. That's one alveolus. All right. And the alveoli are one cell thick. One cell thick. One cell thick. One cell thick. This here is the capillary. This here is the capillary. The capillary also is one cell thick. The capillary is also one cell thick. So in an exam for 4 marks, describe the adaptations of the alveolus. It's got a blood capillary surrounding it. And these are the red blood cells. These here are the red blood cells. So the red blood cells are in the capillary. So the red blood cells are in the capillary, and we breathe in oxygen. Can you see here? We breathe in oxygen. The oxygen is what we breathe in into the alveolus, and then it needs to diffuse from a high to a low concentration. It diffuses from a high to a low concentration. So the oxygen diffuses from a high to a low concentration. And that's the reason why the alveolus has got a one cell thick wall, to reduce the diffusion pathway. Imagine if there was like 3 or 4 cells thick, it would take longer. So now the oxygen is transferred into the red blood cells. Can you see? It's transferred into the red blood cells. It's transferred into the red blood cells. So now these red blood cells can carry the oxygen away. So remember, it's got a one cell thick wall. The alveolus and the capillaries both have a one cell thick wall. So in your exam, you could be asked the adaptations of the capillary. It's got a one cell thick wall to increase the rate of diffusion. That is the answer. Why does the alveolus have a one cell thick wall? To increase the rate of diffusion. Let's understand what that means. So what we've got here is a one cell thick wall. And this is the diffusion pathway. It's a very short diffusion pathway. So the O2 is going to diffuse very quickly. Imagine if there were 2 cells thick, okay, and there was a 2 cell thick capillary. What would happen is that the oxygen, let me rewind, the oxygen would take, look at the diffusion pathway, it's much longer. So it would take longer for oxygen to diffuse. Therefore, having a one cell thick wall increases the rate of diffusion, increases the rate of diffusion. So it increases the rate of diffusion. So this here is the red blood cell, which carries some CO2, and there's going to be some CO2 in the blood. So the CO2, the carbon dioxide, is going to diffuse from the blood into the alveolus, from the blood into the alveolus, from a high to low concentration. Okay, from a high to low concentration. Can you see? So the CO2 is going to diffuse out. Sorry, the CO2 is going to, The CO2 is going to diffuse out of the alveolus. So the carbon dioxide diffuses out as we. What we've got here, remember, is a one cell thick wall to reduce the diffusion pathway. They've got a large surface area. Remember that. Large surface area to increase the rate of diffusion. So look here, how big the surface area is. So not only do they have a one cell thick wall, they've got a large diffusion area. A large surface area. So in an exam tomorrow, if you are asked, explain how the alveoli is adapted for gas exchange, number 1, one cell thick wall. One cell thick wall. It's got a large surface area, 2 marks. Those are 2 marks. This is to the one cell thick wall is to reduce the diffusion pathway. To reduce the diffusion pathway, 3rd mark in your exam. And then It is to increase the rate of diffusion. The whole point is to increase the rate of diffusion. So remember this for tomorrow. This could be a 4-mark question. A 1-cell thick wall, literally bullet point this. If you see anything to do with alveolus adaptations or capillary adaptations, 1-cell thick wall, 1-cell thick wall, it reduces the diffusion pathway, or means that the oxygen has to diffuse less far. 2nd mark. It's got a large surface area, both of them do, the capillary and the alveoli, which then increases the rate of diffusion. 4 marks. 4 marks. Okay, 4 marks. And one last one, it's got a good blood supply. Sorry, let me skip forwards. As you can see here, it's got a good blood supply to maintain the concentration gradient. A good blood supply. Okay, a good blood supply. Alveoli is so alveolus is 1. Alveoli is 2 or more. And also, can you see here that it's moist? The last one, it is moist. It's got a moist lining, again, so that it increases the rate of diffusion. It increases the rate of diffusion, a moist lining. So, good blood supply, moist lining, 2 marks. Good blood supply, moist lining. Remember, 1-cell thick wall, 1-cell thick wall for the capillary alveoli. This is to reduce the diffusion pathway to increase the rate of diffusion. All right? Right, so this here is an artery. You can see it's an artery because it's got a thin lumen, a narrow lumen where the blood is being transported. So an artery, you can bullet point this, has got a narrow lumen, a narrow lumen. So this is an artery. It transports blood away from the heart, A for away. This here is an artery, and it's got a narrow lumen. A narrow lumen, but it's got a thick muscle and elastic layer. Thick muscle and elastic layer, where it's got a narrow lumen. So it's got a narrow lumen and a thick muscle layer. All right. So this is so the thick muscle wall is stronger, okay, to withstand higher blood pressure. So remember, the thick muscle wall is to withstand high blood pressure. In your exam, you can be asked for 3 marks. State the adaptations of an artery. An artery is a narrow lumen. It's got a thick muscle layer and an elastic layer. This is to withstand the high blood pressure because it's got a high blood pressure in the narrow lumen. 3 marks. Okay? And the elastic fibers allow the arteries to stretch and spring back.